What is up, everybody? Clint Lamb with Cover Crimson, here to talk about Alabama's latest commitments. Appreciate you guys being here. Let me make sure I got this sound right. Yeah, we're good to go. Think we're good to go. Let me go ahead and tweet this out. Let everybody know that we're here. We're live. We're ready to rock and roll. What is up, everybody? Kathy Poole, roll tide to you. Definitely hit that like button if you haven't already. Mimi's, appreciate you being here. Hello and roll tide, y'all. Sean Ray, let's go. Roll Tide Clint, appreciate you. Keith, RTR. Tyrell Strickland, Roll Tide. Sunday Travel, Roll Tide Bama Nation. KD is cooking. First of all, appreciate all you guys for being here. This is a lot that we've had to discuss as far as Alabama's roster and just the changing landscape of it versus what they lost in the transfer portal versus what they got. We're going to be talking about all of it. I'm going to be taking y'all's comments and questions. Just bear with me. I'm about to tweet this out real quick, and then we'll get on to it. I love this edition, by the way. I think it's absolutely critical for Alabama to have added some of the players that they have when it comes to the defensive front. Like, we started talking about the offensive line yesterday, all the different additions, and I've been going through and looking at some of the pressure numbers and, trying to figure out kind of what they lost versus what they're gaining. And I think it's pretty interesting, but we'll dive right in. Obviously, they got Desmond Umeozulu. I think is how you say that. I'm working on it. Umeozulu. Actually, I think they call him Des Zulu. I'm going to try to refer to him as Des Zulu, but that's his actual name. Pretty talented guy. I mean, 6'6", 255 pounds. Seen a lot of people say, is this guy going to play Wolf? Is he going to play Bandit? To me, he's going to be a Bandit. I just think when you look at his skill set, his length, his movement, it does not scream Wolf to me. I think he's the kind of guy that he's already 255 pounds. I think maybe you get up to 265, 270. Does he need to go up to 280 like a Keon Keeley? I don't think so. I think 265 would actually be really good with his length. You're not going to want him doing a whole lot as far as being playing in a three-man front, defensive end, four-eye inside shoulder of the tackle, four head up the tackle, or even playing. You can have him playing some five tech outside shoulder, but really I don't think there's many situations unless he continues to bulk up and get a lot bigger, add a lot more mass. I don't see many situations where he's playing too much in those three-man fronts. I think right now, the way I view him, he's a guy you want out there on the edge. He's a situational player. And as you'll see here in just a minute, I think in a lot of ways he is a Keon Keeley replacement in those obvious passing situations, playing opposite Yanze Pierre or one of the other Wolves. That's kind of how I'm starting to view him. Let's go ahead and get some. Yes, Kyron, if you can pronounce Mbumwa, you can pronounce Umeozulu. I got the pronunciation, Umeozulu. It's just and I was doing this when they first got Caden Strayhorn, where it takes me a little bit of time for my brain to register. For some odd reason, I kept wanting to say Jaden because there's so many Jadens or Jalen's involved with Alabama. And then, Mbumoa, I think is what I used to say as far as Mbumwa. So it took me a while to get that down. We'll get it. Don't worry. Let's see. We're MD Port. We're getting scraps and people are acting like it's news. This isn't scraps. It's not. I'm not going to get on here and act like they just added another LT Overton caliber player, even though we'll get to that here in just a minute. This is a good, steady, potential starting option for you. And you know what? We'll go ahead and get into it since that's the comment. We'll talk about it. I'm not going to try to BS you guys. I mean, if I feel like a guy's a good get, I'll say that. If I feel like he's not a great get, I'll say that. If I feel like if I'm mixed on it, I'll say that. I've always wanted to be upfront and honest, but when you start looking at the pressure numbers, which is, I think, the most important element of what Zulu is going to bring to the table here, and when you look at what Keon Keeley did last year, 9 pressures on 100 pass rushing snaps. That's a pressure every 11.1 pass rushing snaps that he played. For his career, he's sitting currently, Keeley is sitting at 10.36. You look at Jordan Renaud, 8 pressures, 145 pass rushing snaps. That's a pressure every 18.1 snaps. A guy like LT Overton, 24 pressures, 256 pass rushing snaps. That's an average of 1 every 10.7 snaps. Now, and I could continue to go through this, and we will, but for Zulu, 15 pressures in 2025, 161 pass rushing snaps. That's an average of a pressure every 10.7 snaps. So that is the exact same amount as LT Overton. That is slightly better than Keon Keeley. That is significantly better at the 18.1 snaps for Jordan Renaud. And if you look at Zulu's career, 9.97. So that's about, roughly about, 0.4 better than Keon Keeley. In some ways, I view Zulu like I view Keeley, where it's like, okay, from a fit standpoint, you really didn't know where to put him at first. I mean, you kind of knew where to put him because you just knew he wouldn't be playing Wolf, but that Wolf is really more of the outside linebacker type, which is what Keon Keeley had been playing under Nick Saban. But you knew that he wasn't a guy that you were going to want to drop into coverage a ton. He's not super fluid. He's really long. He's really big. You knew he had a frame that could handle significantly more weight. A lot of these things describe Zulu. Don't think they're the same player by any means. In fact, I think from an explosiveness standpoint, I think Zulu provides a little bit more. But I could see if Keeley ends up in a different system and he drops a little bit of weight, I think that would help him. I think he could be pretty productive. I'm not saying Zulu is going to outproduce Keeley necessarily, because I still think Keeley has tremendous upside. But based off of what both Renaud and Keeley gave you at that bandit position in 2025, especially from a pass rushing perspective, I think Zulu replaces that. I think bare minimum, he gives you that. I think he can be a pretty decent run defender as well, but you don't want him being a guy, especially at his current height and weight, 6'6", 255 pounds. You don't want him playing inside a ton. And granted, Keeley was kind of viewed the same way. I viewed him the same way. He did have to play in some of those 3-man fronts, that 3-4 defensive end type of role, but I don't think he was great at it, first of all. And he wasn't asked to do it a ton really until LT Overton got injured or had a health issue when he had to miss time, and they didn't really have a choice. They had to platoon Renaud and Keeley, and so you started seeing a little bit more of that. But prior to that, that was just something that, Keeley was more situationally used. I like this get because when you start looking at the bodies that Alabama has in its, along its defensive front, the fact that they added a Kedrick Bingley Jones, who has, as I've mentioned multiple times, the ability to be more of an early down, impactful player out there in the C gap, which to me, at 6'4", 320 pounds like he is, you just don't see that a ton. And he's not super fluid. He's not super athletic. He's really a nose playing out there, but he's a pretty good C gap player. So I like that addition. He can play further inside. He can play the 3 tech, which is where you're going to see him the most. He's probably going to play further inside than that. The 2, 2I, 1, 0, head up. He's going to be playing all along your defensive front, but I think he's going to be a rotational player. You look at a guy like Terrence Green, talked about him yesterday, the interior defensive lineman from Oregon. That's your 0-1 technique. Nose, 6'5", 330 pounds, is going to, play obviously over the guard some. That's expected. He's definitely going to be able to do that and do that at a pretty high level. Not going to offer much of anything as far as the pass rush. I think he had 3 pressures total this past season for Oregon, but he's a very good run stopper. I think he helps Alabama's run defense. You look at a guy like Devin Tompkins, who I had penciled in as an interior player, a 3-tech defensive tackle, but since they've added some of these other guys, and I'm just looking at Jeremiah Beeman and Edric Hill and Isaiah Faga and Stephen Boumwa and London Simmons, I think that they are probably going to play Devin Tompkins as an outside guy on early downs, and then he will be one of those LT Overton types, or maybe a Jamarian Latham type prior to him dropping the weight and moving to Wolf, where you'll actually see them move a little bit further inside in some of those obvious passing situations and maybe Devin Tompkins can give you some juice from the interior, provide an interior complementary pass rush to what you're hopefully getting out of Yanze Pierre and some of these other guys as far as the exterior pass rush. So that's something that, I think he's going to be a versatile piece for Alabama, but Zulu, he's kind of a tweener between the two positions. But as I said, the Bandit is the closest thing you're going to get to like a true 3-down edge. Yes, you'll have them drop, when you're sending those simulated pressures, you'll drop your Bandit into coverage, but it's kind of like dropping your interior defensive lineman like a Tim Keenan or something like that, where it's kind of out of the ordinary. You don't see it a ton. And it's mostly those players, whether it be from a 2 or 3 point stance. And I think Zulu can do either at a high level. He's going to be that type of player. I would just classify him as an edge. But as far as the position group that he's going to be going with, in practice and everything, I would assume it's going to be the defensive line at this point. We'll have to see how his body changes, but already being 255 pounds, only 1 year of eligibility left. He's an older player, but I don't know. I like the addition. I really do. Like, I think this was very much needed between Terrence Green and Des Zulu. That's two where now you have some positional flexibility with some other guys. You can do more with London Simmons. You can do more with Devin Tompkins, and they can provide you steady rotational reps. I think Terrence Green also has some starting upside, and maybe Zulu does too. Maybe I'm underselling him at this point. I don't think he's a world beater by any means right now. Very long. He's got the athleticism. He's got the explosiveness, but we have not really seen him produce at a high enough level to this point where I'm going to say this guy's going to be an absolute stud. But I do think based off of what your other two Bandits, other than LT Overton, were giving you in 2025, I think he can give you that. And the fact that you had lost Jordan Renaud and Keon Keeley on top of losing LT Overton, there was concern at that Bandit position. So I'm really actually excited in kind of, how they are approaching this late. It's not super late, but you start talking about the concern in the trenches. And just the last few days, Alabama has been stacking commitments on the offensive and defensive line, which has really helped. I'm excited about this addition. Let's get to some of y'all's comments. First of all, we do have a super chat. Wesley Tide, appreciate the 267 super chat. Any chance of film breakdowns this offseason? We've considered that. It's something that I'm terrified of doing it. I know others do it, and they kind of find a way around it. The Film Guy Network, he kind of has like a camera filming the TV that kind of where he's not just taking the straight up film and posting it. I will post clips sometimes. The SEC is a little bit more lenient with that. The Big Ten, talking about Devin Tompkins and talking about Terrence Green and some of these guys they've added, I won't touch that. Whether it be on Twitter, whether it be on YouTube, I'm not doing it because the Big Ten is looking to axe anybody and everybody they possibly can. And the last thing I want to do is get this channel taken away from both me and you guys. Same thing with my Twitter account. So I'm very careful, and sometimes I might be a little bit too lenient, but you never know. I've literally watched this change. I've watched it go from them being lenient to all of a sudden they start axing people and it gets ugly. And I just, I can talk about it. I can watch the film, discuss. I will try to implement some of that, but just understand that there's kind of a reason why I'm very reluctant to do it because, this, as we're trying to build this, the last thing we need to do is put ourselves in a position where we, get stuff taken away from us. But we've also been considering some other ways that's like not on YouTube and won't be on, directly on social media that maybe we can use where we can, do some of that stuff and post it there. And if we do, I'll definitely keep you guys posted. It was a good question, fair question. I just want everybody to know that's why I typically stay away from it. Others might go about it differently, but there's a method behind the madness, I guess you'd say. Let's see. Army adding Arian Carter would make this defense unbelievable. I mean, I like the defense overall. Still have some questions. I'm telling you, and I'm going to be posting this to Twitter at Clint R. Lamb whenever we get off the show. I like doing the updates and stuff and haven't had a chance to post it. And I've gone more in depth. If you've seen some of the roster breakdowns that I've posted to Twitter, I've kind of, I think I've done it where there was a T next to the player's name, and that means it's a transfer portal edition. And if he's got a star next to his name, that means he redshirted, but it kind of breaks everything out by position and then senior, junior, sophomore, freshman, the new signees. I don't put them in the freshman category. I want everybody to kind of see them broken out. And then I include departures. And for the defense, I bolded this time around any player who has started 3 or more games for Alabama in 2025. I bolded that player's name so you can get an idea based off of who started versus who didn't. You can probably go 4 games. You could maybe even go as small as 2, because on offense, when I did that, some guys who got taken away, like Latsier Brooks, he started 2 games. So that makes Alabama's returning experience look a little worse if I cut it off at 3, but 3 is 25% of the regular season. Sure, you can get 3 what I would call spot starts in a season, but I feel like once you get to 3, you've played pretty significant football. And so that's why I made the cutoff 3. You could do whatever you wanted to, but guys who started 3 or more games for Alabama on defense, that is now gone. Tim Keenan, James Smith, LT Overton, Jordan Renaud, Quay Russaw, Deontay Lawson, Justin Jefferson, Damani Jackson, Deshaun Jones. Not as bad as the offense, but there's still some uncertainty and some unknown with the defense. So while, I'm not saying you're wrong, Army. I'm not saying that it wouldn't look unbelievable, but I'm saying there's some of this that I'm still going to need to see, if that makes sense. All right, let's I just already got a text, got distracted there for a second. That's a great point. I love Arian Carter. Think he's got the SEC experience that you look for. And with Alabama currently, like Caleb Woodson being a redshirt senior, he's had some starting experience. Obviously, it's not like he's like a 30-game starter or a 20-plus game starter, despite the fact that he's a fifth-year player. But he's had, I want to say, around 10 starts in his career, maybe a little bit more. But other than that, like Caden Jones, 0 experience pretty much. QB Reese, Luke Metz, Duke Johnson, Abdul Sanders, and then you got guys like Xavier Griffin and Say Hall. The experience in that room, maybe guys who have spent a little time in the system, but being on the field for meaningful snaps. You've got Caleb Woodson, and that was in the ACC playing for a different program. He's got to learn Kane Wommack's defense. Outside of that, you don't really have that at that position. And so that's something I'll be curious to see. Arian Carter also would need to be adjusting to a new defensive system and everything else. But I also think just the fact that you're going to get a bona fide stud, I would love it if they can make that happen. Don't know that they will, but anybody that brings that up, I can't really say I blame you for it. Let's see. Army also said was disappointed last week, but they've made great additions. They really have. Like, they've really bounced back strong here. And I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, I do think that there was some level of they thought they were going to be able to compete for some, get a chance to pitch some of these other guys that didn't even give them an opportunity. And between that and then you kind of put all your eggs early in that Hollywood Smothers basket. You thought you had him locked up. You thought he was going to give your offense a little something that maybe you didn't have in 2025. And then you lose him. In some ways, I do think that left Alabama scrambling just a bit. And this is new. It's one portal window. Everybody's going to enter that's considering entering because they know they don't have that second opportunity post-spring. You're trying to retain your own roster. Everybody's got the full court press, so it's even more extensive as far as the tampering and trying to pressure guys to get in. And I think it was an adjustment period. And some, when you're able to swing, you got a big war chest at your back and you can, pretty much outpay everybody. It's going to make you look pretty good. But when you're trying to be smart in how you navigate these waters, if you don't come out swinging, you could maybe find yourself scrambling a little bit. But I give this coaching staff a ton of credit for their ability to bounce back. When I say coaching staff, once again, that also includes Courtney Morgan. These guys found players who can really help this team, both from a depth standpoint and from the standpoint of you get potential starters. I don't think there's, outside of Devin Tompkins, actually, let me look at it. Devin Tompkins is one that I would say is pretty much a surefire starter. Noah Rogers will be in that competition with like Rico Scott, so that's no sure thing, but I would think he would be considered a starter even if he's wide receiver 4. But like Racing Delgatti, going to be in that competition. It's all dependent on how it translates to a much higher level. Nick Brooks is another one who will compete. Josh Ford will compete, but there's nobody else other than Devin Tompkins that I say that's a surefire 100% starter. Even a guy like Terrence Green, I think he probably ends up starting. I think he's going to be a great player regardless, whether he rotates or he ends up being a starter. But, depends on what ends up happening. Like, it's Edric Hill. Does he continue to improve and get bigger? And maybe he ends up taking over as that starting 3 tech, and then you leave London Simmons at the 0-1. Does Jeremiah Beeman come back from his injury and kind of recapture form? And now he's ready to push. I mean, these are things that I don't really think are necessarily going to happen, but it's a possibility. Devin Tompkins is like the one surefire guy. So I don't think they went out and they just added a bunch of guys that are definitely going to be starters, 100%, going to be great players, elite players at their position, all SEC caliber players, nothing like that. But across the board, really respect how they've been able to bounce back, kind of replenish the depth, and actually give some options. Like, I think Zulu, I think he's better in some ways than what you were going to have with Keon Keeley and Jordan Renaud. Now, you don't have LT Overton at the top. I would love for, LT Overton to be back and Zulu kind of be that, number 2, bandit, being more situationally used. But maybe Devin Tompkins ends up being that guy for you. Maybe he ends up playing bandit and doesn't really play a whole lot of 3-tech. Either way, I like how it's shaping up overall. I think it's been, staff's done a really good job of bouncing back, no doubt. Garrett Gaskin, appreciate the $9.99 super chat. I'm very pleased with the additions. Not saying all these guys will be all SEC, but very valuable puzzle pieces. This defensive staff has continued to develop and elevate guys over the last 2 seasons. Yeah, a lot of versatility there. Like Devin Tompkins, the fact that we're saying, I don't know if he's going to play 3-tech or bandit. We don't know if Des Zulu's going to play Wolf or bandit. Kedrick Bingley Jones, built like a nose, but can play the 3 and can even shift out and be one of those 3, one of those 30 front defensive ends for you. There's a lot of versatility, no doubt about it. I think Justin Hill could play off the ball. I think he could play on the ball. Caden Jones can provide some versatility for you. Caleb Woodson. I really like how this group is shaping up on defense and on offense. Once again, versatility with your offensive line, guys who could end up playing a number of different positions. And you got a quarterback battle. So there's some uncertainty with this roster overall, but I really like how things are kind of starting to pick up for Alabama. P-Phils, have they reached 85 scholarships yet? I know they could reach 105, but we were in a hole for a while. So I did look at this, and based off of my calculations, Alabama currently has 40 players on offense, 41 on defense, and 5 specialists. You still kept both your punters, you kept both your kickers, and you added a new long snapper. You lost David Byrd. So I got 5 specialists probably on scholarship if I had to guess. That gives you a total of 86 players. Now, Jackson Shuttlesworth, that's one of them where he's like really a preferred walk-on, but I think he's technically going to be on scholarship because you can go all the way to 105. MJ Churgwin, the wide receiver, we talked about him. He has ultimately chose to return. He has announced he's going to be on scholarship, but I kind of would still view him in that preferred walk-on. So you can up to 86, but maybe 84, 83 as far as guys who would typically be a part of that 85 who are currently on scholarship. And maybe if you didn't have that flexibility, you wouldn't have 2 punters and 2 kickers. But yeah, I think you're definitely north of 80 players, 80 true players who would have been a scholarship player in 2025 who are already on the roster. And they're courting some other players. Like the one that I haven't mentioned that they ended up getting was MJ Mathis, the wide receiver that was committed to Samford, in-state product. And I just haven't had a chance to watch him yet, so I can't really comment on him. But I know that now they're sitting at 8 wide receivers. That certainly helps. When you were sitting there at 5, before you got Noah Rogers and you got Churgwin back and Mathis, you had 5 that I really liked at the top. I thought you were really in a good place as far as the top of your wide receiver depth chart. But from a number standpoint, we knew they had some work to do. And it's tough because when you do have the top of your depth chart in that position, it's tough to sell guys. Hey, come be our wide receiver 6 or our wide receiver 7. Even some of these smaller school guys, they're like, man, I would love to step up in competition. Yeah, it would be a dream come true to play for Alabama, but that's play for Alabama, not come, practice for Alabama, not be on the practice squad. And so the sell becomes a little bit more difficult. So they were kind of in a position where they were never going to fill out their depth chart with just guys who were stacked and ready to contribute and rotate. but I do think that they got at least 5 receivers right now who could be in the rotation between Ryan Williams, Noah Rogers, Rico Scott, Lottie Brooks, and Derek Meadows. And then CD Morgan being that wide receiver, what I would call wide receiver 6 right now, where he could easily climb, but he doesn't have to. I think at the top, you could have a very solid 4 or 5 man rotation and get quality, steady play. But then CD Morgan can kind of be the icing on the cake. He can be a guy who can come in and steal some snaps and maybe even steal a job, like being a full-time, maybe even become the wide receiver 4 or something. I don't necessarily think he's going to start as a true freshman, but once again, we'll have to wait and see. But I do like how things are trending right now. No doubt about it. The tight end group is pretty loaded. Speaking of guys just who started 3 or more games for Alabama on offense, Daniel Hill didn't end up qualifying, mostly due to injury to Jam Miller, but he qualified. Ryan Williams started 3 or more games. Rico Scott surprisingly did. Lottie Brooks did not. Rico, I think, started 3. Lottie Brooks started 2. So Lottie just didn't quite qualify, but he was right there in that conversation. But then you got Caleb Edwards, who was a true freshman, and Michael Carroll, who was a true freshman. So you've got, that's 5 guys. Michael Carroll, Caleb Edwards, Rico Scott, Ryan Williams, and Daniel Hill. Those are the only 5 players on offense who started 3 or more games in 2025 for you. Now, you did add Noah Rogers, who started, obviously, 3 or more games for his respective team. Josh Ford did, despite the fact that he only played in 4 before electing the red shirt, and he did start some games as a true freshman for Oklahoma State. He technically qualifies. So he's included with that. Nick Brooks started 3 or more, and Rayson Delgatti, obviously he was the full-time starter at center for Cal Poly, but those are the only, 4 other guys? So it's an inexperienced group on offense. It is, but it's a moldable group. And that's what kind of makes me excited, is that there's a lot of talent there, but they've just got to make sure they're getting proper development. Superfly, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Hit that like button. We needed this pod in every college football fan's algorithm. Roll Tide, Bama family. Thank you so much. I was excited. I mean, I was out to spending some time with the family, with the wife and mother-in-law, and my sister-in-law's getting married, in May, and we were eating dinner with my, soon-to-be brother-in-law and his parents, and just so happens that anytime I try to do anything, you can rest assured that news is going to break. And not only did they get, Zulu, they also added the new wide receiver, Mathis. So I tried to get back as soon as I could. It was a couple hours, but I appreciate you guys for being here and being patient with me for sure. Gary Grace, Clint says we're stacking players, but On3 still has us ranked 45 in the transfer portal rankings. We will see what Alabama players work out. The transfer portal rankings are completely bogus, in my opinion. Completely. It's a crapshoot. There's over 10,000 players in the portal. Do we think anybody has looked at all 10,000 players? Any of these services? I have a lot of respect for On3. I worked there. At various points, I've worked for Rivals, I've worked for 24/7 Sports, and I've worked for On3. And I respect what they do. And I think they're wonderful at what they do. But I'm not going to convince myself that they've looked extensively at over 10,000 players. So how in the world do you know how these guys are supposed to rank? Now, granted, just because you haven't looked at all 10,000 don't mean you can't rank the ones that you've seen. But it's also a lot of, okay, I'm watching this guy versus this competition. I'm watching this guy versus this competition. Like guys like Isaiah Horton, he was ranked, I want to say, pretty well outside of the top 100 transfer portal players last year. But that was considered a massive get for Alabama at that position. And I thought he was underrated. Granted, I didn't watch every single one of these other guys to know how he stacked up. But, it's difficult. And it's difficult to know. Guys have been in rotational roles like Zulu. He spent time behind some good edges, man. South Carolina's had some really good players. Kyle Kennard, obviously Dylan Stewart, Brian Thomas Jr. These are all NFL players. And so, while he has been kind of buried in a lot of ways, he's still a talented, toolsy player who we'll just have to wait and see what it ends up looking like. I'm not trying to sell sunshine, though. I'm telling you that I'm not going to look at them being ranked number 45 in the transfer portal rankings and freak out about it and say, oh, my God, they're screwed. I understand everybody's used to seeing a 1 or top 10 somewhere, next to Alabama's name when it comes to any roster acquisition talent ranking system. Alabama's always up there. And so you see them at 45 and there's some level of panic, and I get that. I don't blame you, Gary. I don't blame you at all. I'm just here to tell you there is projecting that I'm talking about. If these guys were established, if Tahe would have been a freshman starter at Michigan and a freshman All-American, and then he transfers to Alabama, then he would be ranked way higher, and those rankings would be ranked way higher. But just because he played 15 snaps in 3 games for Michigan, because he was a raw player, he still just got a year of development behind the scenes at Michigan. We'll have to wait and see what he becomes at Alabama, but he could still become the same player, you know, with how he's kind of his career so far has transpired, that he would have become had he been that player who was a freshman All-American who got the opportunities as a freshman at Michigan. So I look at the player, I look at the skill set. I've been doing this for a long time. I say a long time. I mean, less than 10 years. Oh, I guess getting to be about 10 years, about 2016 when I really started diving into this stuff. But, you know, I've watched a lot of guys, and used to, I was big in the NFL draft, and I did my own first round mock drafts. And I'd watch 200 prospects, you know, sometimes a little bit more than that. Never could watch as many as the big people, but I try to get my eyes on a ton of different players. So I feel like I've seen a lot, and I kind of know it, you know, to some extent what the NFL was looking for, but I also have kind of gotten a better feel for what Alabama's looking for. And I see the skill sets. I see how they could potentially fit, and I like the fit, you know, and I think they could be good. But once again, and granted, I say all of this, let me go ahead and put this out there. It came up yesterday. I don't remember what was said. Someone back and forth. I think Mike Rodak went on a radio show and he said that he saw, you know, he could see maybe 7-5, 8-4. And someone brought that up to me. And to be fair, I don't see 7-5. I don't. But I could see the Vegas over-under being at 8.5. I really could, which means they're saying, are you going to go with 9-3 in the regular season, or are you going to go with 8-4? That might not seem great. I think 9-3 would be in line with what I would project right now. I think enough things come together where you get 9-3. If more things come together than I'm predicting or projecting right now, a lot of these things start to hit. You can get to 10-2. Nowadays, it's very tough. You know, having the mulligans that you do in college football, I understand teams can still go 11-1, but Alabama, I would have to view them as like a top 10 team preseason to project them to go 11-1. So I think if the right things start going correct, you can get up to 10-2. I could also see less than what I'm predicting coming together, me projecting a little bit differently than how it plays out, and I can see them going 8-4. I know that's not what fans want to hear, and yeah, I think fans will be in a full-on panic mode if they do go 8-4. But that's just where I think things are at right now. So while I'm telling you all this, and I'm telling you reasons why it can all come together, there's still so much uncertainty. There's still projecting going on by me. So I hope I'm not selling that or packaging that in a way that is selling pie in the sky to fans. I want to be realistic here. I always want to be upfront, but I'm also going to always look at things through more of a positive lens. So, but if you were to ask me straight up, what would you project Alabama's record to be in 2026? I would probably say 9-3, and I wouldn't be shocked at 10-2, and I wouldn't be shocked at 8-4. And 8-4 is going to fall well short of expectations, and people will react how they react to that. But that's just where I'm at right now. We'll see what happens once I can get my eyes on them a little bit in the spring. We hear some things, hear how guys are developing, and I will be careful as far as the summer stuff and people who are at practice and telling me what they're seeing, because I did buy into it quite a bit last summer. And then when Florida State happened, I was left looking like an idiot. So I will be more cautious. Don't get me wrong. Appreciate the comment, though. I get it. Gary Grace. Yeah, nobody knows right now who is going to start next year. You're just guessing. I am just guessing. Yes, you are correct. Michael Carroll, Ron Williams, Lyseer Brooks. Anybody else I go ahead and for sure throw in that offensive category? No, not really. I don't think so. Defensive secondary, feel pretty good about that and who's going to start. I'm guessing Jan Zapier is going to be a starter. But yes, you're correct. Pretty much at most other spots, I don't know where they're going to start. I don't know who's going to start. That's the beauty of this. We get to talk about it, how it could all look. It's fun, man. It's fun, and it doesn't have to be stressful. We're trying to enjoy the off season. It's no football. I don't know about you guys, but my heart breaks when football season ends. And I've been itching for now a couple of weeks to get some more, football talk in. And this transfer portal has done that. And it was panic, but it was also a lot of great conversations that came out of it as far as what to expect and how things operate. And we're all learning on the fly. I mean, there's some of this stuff I didn't anticipate. I never in a million years would have thought that it would have looked like this going into the transfer portal. Like, I just thought, I don't know why, but I wasn't anticipating it. So yeah, no one knows who's going to start. You're right. Drake Riley, do you think Desmond plays Wolf or Bandit? Once again, I think he plays Bandit just because he's a little light to play Bandit right now. But in the same way that I projected Keon Keeley back when this new coaching staff first got here, I projected him to play Bandit, was because of the length and the size and the frame. In my mind, it's like, he's not a guy that you go from being whatever he is right now, 245 pounds when he first got on campus. I'm not expecting him to drop to 240 or 235 and just be this really long wolf. You don't really see wolves, I haven't really, that are 6'5". Yanze Pierre's got quite a bit of length, but he's 6'3", might even be closer to 6'2", but I think he's 6'3". What is Justin Hill at? 6'3", 242. Noah Carter, well, maybe he was up to 6'4", but like you don't see just a ton of length. You don't see 6'5" and 6'6". And just when you watch him, I mean, just the way that he moves, he doesn't move like this guy who's going to be super comfortable dropping into space and playing that shallow off-ball linebacker. Yeah, that's just not what I envisioned for Zulu. So I think he's going to play Bandit. I personally think that they're going to take the Keon Keeley route. I don't think they should take it to the extent that they did. I think they would have benefited from it more to have Keeley get up to 260, 265, have him play Bandit a little bit lighter and have that explosiveness. I think being 280 plus pounds, he lost a little bit of that zap. And, based off of what you were really asking him to do prior to LT Overton's injury, as far as being more situationally used, I think he would have been better being a little bit lighter. So I think this is your chance to kind of right that ship and take a guy who's got some pass rushing upside, add a little bit more weight and mass where he can hold up against the run a little bit better, but maybe 260, 265. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just think that when they break out in the spring for positional drills, my guess is that he's going to be going with the defensive line, which tells me he's going to be playing Bandit. But he's not the same type. There's multiple. Like LT Overton, he has the ability to play inside. If you want to put him as a 3-tech over a guard, especially in passing situations, let him get after the quarterback. He can do that, and he can do that pretty effectively. Guys like Justin Aboigbe, I understand it was a different system, but back when he played for Nick Saban and they had that heavy end, there was really an interior defensive lineman that they had when they had the 4-down lineman, you had a guy like Justin Aboigbe out there on the edge, and then you had one of those jack linebackers on the other side. But Aboigbe in those passing situations, he's shifting inside. He's not playing as a true 3-down edge. You have that type of bandit. And then you have the bandits that's like, just from their skill set standpoint, you're really not going to shift them inside. And I think Keon Keeley, for the most part, he was that type of player. You just didn't want him doing that a ton, because I don't think from, having the ability to anchor and hold up at the point of attack and having the mass that he needed. And even when he did have the mass, I never thought he had the functional strength, like the core strength to really be able to dig in there and be a guy who played on the interior. Zulu, in some ways, I view him the same way, but I also think there's just a little bit more upside here with him. And maybe I end up being wrong on that, and Keeley has a breakout year in South Bend, but that's kind of how I'm viewing it right now. Deboo, appreciate you being here. Sean Ray, 2 questions. 1, are there any freshmen that can enroll this summer that we will still sign? And 2, what about the young linebackers we signed last year, Metz, Duke Johnson, etc.? Yeah, I mean, I think, I think a guy like MJ Mathis, and the fact that they added him late, like he's kind of being sprinkled into this, but that's another guy where you were limited because the early signing period had already come and gone, and I would say north of 9 out of 10 recruits, high school recruits, signed during that period. As far as the JUCO options who are still available, the high school options, If they would have known they still had some areas of weakness, they probably could have targeted even more on the high school level to really add in some places where they maybe needed some help. But they were trying to save money for the transfer portal, and that is what it is. But a guy like Mathis, he was committed to Sanford. I don't know what his reasoning was for waiting to sign. Maybe he was wanting to wait and see if something like this played out, where now there's some places that have some spots available and need numbers, and now he gets the opportunity to play at a place like Alabama. I think that was a lot of guys probably look at it that way, and it's probably smart for more high school players to do that. Like if you're on the brink, if you really want to play in the SEC or something, you want to play in the absolute best conferences, but you end up signing with, a respectable program, a UAB, a Southern Miss, maybe even, a lower tiered Big 12 or ACC. If you want to kind of hold out, wait till February, see how the transfer portal plays out. Maybe you can end up getting some scholarships to much bigger schools. Maybe that's a learning curve that's got to happen here. But Mathis has already been one of those players. I'm sure that it's limited. It's slim pickings at this point on that front. But I wouldn't rule that out because Mathis wasn't on my radar. I still haven't even checked him out. And they found him and thought, okay, from a depth standpoint, this is a guy we feel like we could get. And so we're willing to go to the high school ranks to fill out the numbers here. And maybe he ends up being a guy that can get in and develop and he can help them. But yeah, that's kind of how I would view that. As far as your second question, like what about the young linebackers we signed last year? I like all of them. I mean, really, when you start looking at it, Luke Metz and Abdul Sanders and Duke Johnson, all three of those guys, I liked a ton. Luke Metz, like he doesn't do anything on an elite level, but he does everything kind of well. He's like it's the cliche, but he's that lunch pail type of linebacker. He's 6'3". I want to say he's 230 pounds maybe. So he's got a little bit of length. I don't think he's got like tree trunk arms or something for being 6'3". He's not the same 6'3" as like a Jahad Campbell, but that's still really good size. And he can run and he can hit, and he's just a steady overall player. Duke Johnson's more of the athlete, more of the space player. I think he's still adjusting to kind of being a consistent second level player, needs to continue to get bigger and stronger. But I think as far as upside, it's certainly up there. It might be higher than pretty much any of these guys if you were to tap into that upside. I mean, he's a former top 100 recruit that ended up falling in the recruiting rankings because there was some projecting going on as far as, okay, he's raw. He's still adjusting to playing, being a second level player, a linebacker, an off-ball linebacker. And we don't know exactly how that's going to end up looking as he makes that transition. And so there's a lot of upside and ability and athleticism and talent there, but they realized, okay, he adjusted to that a little bit slower. So we need to kind of temper our expectations. He ended up dropping a little bit in the rankings. And so it was probably just going to take him some time, in Tuscaloosa, but I like him a lot. And then Abdul Sanders, there for a while at least, he was the one that came in and kind of made the immediate splash. And I thought maybe he could even get in the conversation to help out as linebacker 4 as a true freshman. Ended up not working out that way. In fact, in some ways, I think he might have fallen behind Metz and Johnson, but definitely don't want to rule him out. But once again, while I like all of those young players, I love Xavier Griffin. And I think that if he puts the work in over the summer and he can get in the playbook and learn and learn Kane Wommack's defense, I think you can use him. And will he be Jahad Campbell in year one where you move him around and put a ton on his plate? I don't think so. I think early on, as much as I would love for him to help situationally, and if they don't add a Wolf, because I still think they're a little light as far as the Wolves are concerned with just Yanze Pierre and Justin Hill, maybe as a true freshman, you end up seeing him play Wolf. I don't know. But whatever you ask him to do that. Give him that task, let him get better, and see if he can chip in and contribute as a freshman. And then as he gets more experience and has been in the system longer, then you can really start to put more and more on his plate and ask him to do more, be one of those versatile chess pieces. So while I have extensively talked about his upside as a Kane Wommack chess piece that I absolutely love for the future, don't confuse it and think I'm saying this guy's going to be this guy out the gate. I don't think that would be fair to him. Give him some things to master, and I think that should help you out. Chris Culture, appreciate the $9.99 super chat. Clint, you mentioned a few videos back that Rayson needed to gain weight at center. I disagree because we do a lot of pulling with a center, and you have to be mobile strength and green weight and a lightweight. I don't know what the end of that says. I'm sorry, but you're pretty much saying Needs to have strength and a lighter weight, maybe. Not so much, or heavyweight, not so much. Look, I think he's a 300-pound guy. I've seen some places list him at 305, but I saw a guy that from just needing strength. Yeah, I understand athleticism is important, but there's a reason that this coaching staff, their philosophy has been, we want these guys as big as we possibly can get them without sacrificing their athleticism. Now, I think in some of these cases, they probably pushed some of these guys too far, and they did end up losing or zapping a little bit of the athleticism. So you have to be careful with that. But this is a guy who's trying to make the transition to the SEC. And I understand that Parker Brailsford was 290 pounds. So you would sit there and say, well, I mean, he's a couple inches taller, and he already weighs 10 more pounds than Parker Brailsford. But I think some of the shortcomings of Parker Brailsford, while I love the athleticism and how it fit within the offense, there were times, when you're running duo and some of those things where maybe he wasn't as good as he needed to be, and so I'm looking at that and saying, well, I think you do need to add a little bit more mass, just making that transition. Do I think he needs to add 20 pounds? No. If they got him up to if he's 300 right now, I think 310, 6'3", 310 would be a really good weight. If it was 305, if he's 300 right now, okay, I'm fine with that too. But he really needs to focus on getting stronger, because I love the athleticism. I still think that, especially stepping up in competition like that, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for him. And I even think on that level, from just he was a bully, but not overpowering people. He just loved burying people when he got the opportunity. He played with that nastiness, but he wasn't Caden Proctoring anybody. He wasn't digging somebody out and driving them 7 yards, down the field. And for being at Cal Poly, you would expect at least a little bit of some of that if you're also asking him to transition to the SEC and try to get SEC interior defensive linemen consistently blocked. Do you see what I'm saying? So while I understand where you're coming from, that's why I said that. I'll leave that up to the coaching staff. I could see it working out in a number of different ways. Garrett Gaskin, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Clint, have you considered making a Discord Cover Crimson group, kind of like how Luke and Jimmy have for Locked on Bama? We have the message board, and for anybody that was subscribed over there, we're redoing it. The person who did it the first time around, they put very little effort into it. It created just a lot of headache for us as far as maintenance. We've actually kind of gone back and getting a professional group coming in, and we're going to give everybody a great deal. Like, we're not trying to, screw everybody over or say, hey, hand us more money. Obviously, as far as cost and running it and some of those things, but for a lot of you guys that we're going to be getting in, we're going to make sure that you have a hell of a deal, where I'm trying to push for even something like, 12 months for, a very affordable price, or something that gets you long-term. And then, but yeah, we do want to do something like that, because all this stuff I put on Twitter, all this information, all these breakdowns, that's something that, I could be putting on a message board, expand on it even more. And as far as the film stuff that you guys want, it could be an area where maybe we try to do something on that front as well. So that's something that we're trying to figure out behind the scenes. Just want to let you know, I think that's a great idea. That's TBD on that. Jonesy, appreciate the $1.99 super chat. Zulu backed up Stewart, would start otherwise, in my opinion. Yeah, I think for South Carolina, he was good enough to start, and it just so happened that he was playing behind a top 10, future top 10 draft pick, and he was playing, Brian Thomas Jr. is a guy who's going to be playing in the NFL, and Kyle Kennard. I think he ended up falling to the third or fourth round, maybe, but he was a really good, one of the best pass rushers in the SEC a couple of years ago. Like, he's played behind some dudes and just hasn't been given really a ton of opportunities. But like I said, when you start looking at his pressure rate, a pressure every 10.7 snaps, pass rushing snaps that he played, that's comparable. Like, Devin Tompkins is at 12.5, so it's better than that, which I would expect that with the way he's built, and more of a pass rusher. But Edric Hill is every 10.7 snaps. Kelby Collins every 11 snaps. Keon Keeley every 11.1 snaps. LT Overton, we all love, every 10.7 snaps with the exact same rate. Noah Carter every 15.3 snaps. Quay Russaw every 8.5 snaps. James Smith, and this is something that I noticed as I was going through this. I just mentioned a ton. And what was I in there? Like that 10 or 11 or 12 snap range usually. I mean, Quay Russaw was at 8.5. That's pretty good. Jan Zapier was at 5.4. Stupid good, but he's also a dynamic pass rusher. So that's not overly surprising. But two things stood out to me. Jordan Renaud averaged a pressure every 18.1 pass rushing snaps, significantly higher than everybody I just mentioned. And then you look at James Smith, he had 11 pressures on 215 pass rushing snaps. That's a pressure on average of every 19.6 pass rushing snaps. So he got plenty of opportunities with 215 as an interior 3-tech player. He produced 11 pressures. And for being kind of I just think he emerged more as a better rundown game wrecker. And he would flash as far as the pass rush, but he just never really, that's where the 5-star side of it never really came to fruition or hasn't so far. And even as a run defender, there was still some inconsistency. But when you talk about guys who fell well short of expectations and they needed bigger impacts from and they didn't get it as far as getting after the quarterback, Jordan Renaud, that's the reason he wasn't ever out there. Like they put Cavante Henry out there as the lone bandit to rush in those obvious passing situations opposite Jan Zapier. They put LT Overton out there some, but Renaud was never out there because he just wasn't an efficient enough pass rusher. And James Smith, despite the fact that he had the 5-star pedigree and he had all this upside on that front, a lot of times in those obvious passing situations, he wasn't out there either. You know, they would turn to other guys. And they just, that when you say, when guys like Clinton Dix, when they make some of the comments that they did, on Twitter, that's kind of what he's talking about. And now Renaud had not entered the portal up to that point, I don't think, but I'm not surprised he ended up leaving. And when you compare Zulu at 10.7 snaps to Renaud at 18.1, and then you compare Devin Tompkins every 12.5 snaps versus James Smith every 19.6 snaps, you've made improvement there. You see what I'm saying? So while the underlying, like you look at the sacks and the tackles for loss and know those things, and you think, I mean, did they really improve? It kind of seems like in some ways they might have taken a step back. When you look at the pressure rate, the efficiency rate as far as getting after the quarterback, Devin Tompkins has been more efficient than James Smith, and Zulu has been more efficient than Jordan Renaud. But there's a run stopping element to that, and I totally get it. And Devin Tompkins needs to be playing bandit in those, he didn't need to be playing the 3-tech like James Smith, but I just think that kind of paints a picture. Jacob Gorman, really think Tompkins plays bandit. I'm with you. I think so too. I think with the way things have played out, I think he'll play bandit, but he will be a situational inside player. I fully believe that. Let's see. Randall Green, we have Pierre and Hill at Wolf. We didn't really need much help there. You need bodies. I mean, you can't. I mean, I get what you're saying. At the top, I agree, which is why I think they would have loved to have had a Jordan Ross. I think Jordan Ross was like a ceiling version of Zulu. Like what you were imagining or what I personally envision as far as Zulu and what he's going to provide your defense, and kind of being more of a, like Jordan Ross, yes, he could probably hold up better as a Wolf. He's played off the ball and he's more comfortable playing in space. But as far as the pass rushing element and being the guy that you have out there, in those obvious passing situations, I thought he was going to make a massive impact there. They didn't get Jordan Ross, didn't even get a chance to get Jordan Ross, but they go out there and they identify a guy that can fill that specific void, and they end up getting a player who I think can be a serviceable player in that sense. And so, but as far as like the Wolf and stuff, you just simply need numbers. It's the same thing that we were talking about at wide receiver when you had 5 or 6. It's like, that's great. We love all the guys you have, but you got to start filling out numbers. You got to have a practice squad. What are you going to do? Have your wide receiver 4 running scout team? Is Justin Hill going to be running scout team because you don't have a scout team outside linebacker? So yeah, they need depth for sure. They need Wolf help. And I don't think Zulu plays that. I don't think Henry plays that. Devin Tompkins isn't going to play it. Caleb Smith is not going to play it. Maybe Jamarian Matthews, maybe, but I still think he's a bandit. I still think he's a guy who ends up, you just go ahead and add the mass. You get him bigger. You get him in that 260 plus, 265 plus range. Maybe if you can even get him up to being a 270, 275, you can really start playing him all up along your defensive front. Get that done as soon as possible, in my opinion. So I just don't see many depth wolf options other than those two guys. And then, of course, Xavier Griffin. And so maybe that ends up being what happens. Let's see. And Peasy, I remember, brother. He asked, would we consider Corey Howard or Jamarian Matthews at Wolf? 2 steps ahead of me, brother. I love it. I love that. I was sitting down there. I should have just gotten y'all's chats faster. Like I said, you can probably play Matthews there, but Matthews, I didn't see him dropping. Like, he has no experience playing off the ball that I know of. Really, he's been a player, at least a lot of the recent film that I saw. He was already playing on the interior for his high school team on the defensive line. Like, he was playing edge and he was playing on the interior. That's typically not the type of player that you say, well, we're not only going to have you as an edge, we're going to have you start playing off ball, some, or having to play in the apex or these different places. Like, that's the Xavier Griffin types of players that you do that with, not really the Jamarian Matthews, but out of necessity, they might. I don't think that would be fair to him because I don't think that's where he's going to play long term. And I really don't think that he's going to be a guy. He can help you as far as a number, but if he's playing Wolf, I don't anticipate him having a massive role unless it's very situational. Like I said, in some of those obvious passing situations or whatever, I'd get him to Bandit as quickly as possible. That's my thought. Corey Howard's really long. He's like an interior player from a build standpoint, but being 6'6", 260 pounds already, I think he's going to be a 6'6", 280-pound freshman, and he's going to play a lot on the interior. That's my thoughts. But it's a good. They're going to have to do something unless they add somebody. Jonesy, why are super chats so difficult to type? YouTube needs to fix that. How are they? Are they more? I don't know. How are they more difficult to type than regular chats? I'd be curious to see. They do need to make that easier if it's not easy on you guys, though. And in fact, I'll start complaining if I can. Someone point me in a direction and complain, and I'll complain. I'll get it right for you guys. Let's see. SCM, Clint, don't you think Bama should hire Jeremy Pruitt as an analyst? I think Kane wants to be a head coach somewhere. Hate to lose Jeremy to another school. I love Jeremy Pruitt. I think he's a great defensive mind. I don't know. Because I just know how this staff operates, and they like familiarity. And Jeremy Pruitt has zero familiarity with like anybody on the staff that I know of. I've not noticed any sort of connections. I don't know how much that plays into it. I'm not saying that Kalen DeBoer would let a very strong, very quality coach slip by because he doesn't know him well enough to hire him. I don't think it's like that. I'm saying that I do know that they have a certain dynamic and a certain culture within their coaching staff, within the building, and they don't want to throw that off. You don't want to bring in a guy who does help with the X's and O's, but he throws off everything else. I'm not saying Jimmy Pruitt's toxic. I'm saying how he operates and it's different. So, and I'm not saying that they wouldn't hire him. I'm saying I don't know. That is something that I at least think about a lot when it comes to these things, and it's why I'm a little bit more reluctant to say, oh, yeah, they should definitely do it. If Nick Saban were still the coach, I would say that needed to be done yesterday. Get this cat back on staff, no doubt. But, there was familiarity there as well. This is a great point, Donald. Donald Andrews, I don't know if these additions make us better, but I don't think we take a step back because of these guys either. I think that's a fair way to put it as far as like the floor. I don't look at these guys and see a significant step back. Maybe somewhat of a step back. I think the lack of experience could hurt Alabama, maybe in the early goings, but I don't think you're going to see like this huge drop off. But I also don't know for sure if they're going to take the steps forward at some of these position groups in order to be better than you were in 2026. But what I will say is that I think having a healthy quarterback for the duration of the season will help. I think them putting a massive emphasis on improving the run game this offseason and saying no matter what, we're going to do whatever it takes this offseason to improve. Georgia put that same emphasis on its run game last offseason. It was not nearly as bad as Alabama's was this year. but it was pretty bad in 2024. And in a lot of ways, I think the run game is what kept Georgia from being more competitive and potentially winning a national championship in 2024. And they were significantly improved this year. Didn't jump to be in top 10 and nationally or anything like that, but they were a lot more effective as far as running the football. They played Gunnar Stockton off of that. I thought it made Gunnar Stockton better. He got more comfortable as the season progressed, and he got more comfortable as opposing defenses started figuring out, whoa, this ain't 2024 Georgia. These guys can run the football a little bit more effectively. And as defenses started to learn that, things got easier on Gunnar Stockton. And so I think Alabama is going to put the same emphasis. Now, granted, the coaching staff's different. Kirby Smart, he comes from that Nick Saban cloth where, I mean, it doesn't need to just look different. It needs to, it needs to look drastically different. That might make things look, you might not see the same improvement, but I think you see some improvement. I think that helps. I think that complements what they're going to have at quarterback and at wide receiver and the strain that they can put on you. Would like to see a little bit more of a system in place for Ryan Grubb. I don't think that right now there's a method to the madness always. I think he's a guy who can dial up some plays. I think he can the creativity, what he has from that standpoint. I just think he's an incredible offensive mind, but there has to be some sort of structure or system in place where you build off of things. You present certain looks throughout a game and you get a defense kind of, okay, this is what they're going to do when they go here. And then you hit something off. It's like this, it's having a system in place that provides structure for your offense. I'd like to see that a little bit more from Ryan Grubb. And really, when I went back and I watched him at Washington or watched the Washington offenses, I didn't realize this at the time, but I probably didn't see that enough there either. This could just be who Ryan Grubb is. It's a little strange. I don't see this too often, but I do think there's some improvement that could be made on that front. But I think overall, this team can take the necessary steps forward, but it won't be without growing pains with the inexperience and just all the new faces and stuff. We talked about how Kane Wommack in year 2, like he was able to do more because you had so many players who were familiar with the system and he had been able to implement his system, and then he could expand on it a little bit more. On the secondary, you can do a lot, but like in the defensive front, I mean, Terrence Green, Kedrick Bingley Jones, Des Zulu, Devin Tompkins, Caleb Smith, 5 true freshmen, a lot up there. It's going to look new and different. On the second level, you do have a majority of your players, 5 of your 8 linebackers have played in this system. That's good. But Caleb Woodson's a guy who could come in and he's going to have to learn the system. And you don't really have a field general at this time. And you're looking at Xavier Griffin, who you think is probably going to be a freshman contributor. There's a learning curve there as far as learning the system. So, I'm not saying that, oh man, it's going to be different. He's going to have to be more conservative or condense things a little bit, go back to it being like 2024, their first year where you can't do everything you want to. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that getting Deontay Lawson and Justin Jefferson and Tim Keenan and LT Overton and a lot of those players back last year, a lot of your headliner starter guys on your defense, that really helped set up things where you could expand on, your system and how it operates. Might not be able to do that to the same extent this year. That creates some uncertainty for me. These are things that I think about. Herb and Raj podcast. Clint Lamb is my best friend, everyone. These guys do a great job as far as their podcast. Work really hard. They're hilarious. They always make me uncomfortable with some kind of question they ask that gets me thinking, and it's always brilliantly done. I have a great time every time I go on with those guys. Jonesy, Clint, do you think the large number of twists we run up front has limited the amount of inside pass rush by the defensive line? I think that contributes. I do. I think that contributes. And that's something that I wonder if you'll see a little bit more of a mix. Now, granted, like Indiana, that great blend, in my opinion, a lot of their production, a lot of their pressure is through those twists and things like the stunts. I do think there's a fine line there. You want to be able to give guys, if you're playing Devin Tompkins on the interior, give him the runway to get after the quarterback. Let him use some of that juice a little bit. Now, if you've got certain guys like, and this is something that I didn't really think about at the time, a couple of years ago, I think it was in 2024, in some of those obvious pass situations, they had guys like Tim Keenan out there. And I was thinking, well, I mean, I don't like that. Tim Keenan he's a pocket collapser at times, but as far as like, providing juice, what I realized was just on some of those, twists and different things that you can do with your defensive front, he was pretty good at that. And he was clearing some things out and creating paths for other guys to make plays. And it's something that just I tend to, okay, it's an obvious pass situation. Put your best rushers out there, go win that way. That's not, and I should have never approached it that way because I knew that's not how it operated, but it's just that's where my mind goes. It's a little Madden esque, a little NCAA esque, and it shouldn't be, but there's different purposes, and that can limit the interior production if they're pretty much running. I would say it's like the equivalent of like a fullback on offense. It's like, oh, this back in the backfield doesn't get a lot of rushing yards. He must not be very good. Well, that's not necessarily the case. That's not his job. His job is to lead block and create yardage for the other back that's in the backfield. It's kind of, but at the same time, James Smith wasn't an overly productive interior pass rusher when he was given those opportunities. And Tim Keenan, he was never going to be that. I don't know with Jeremiah Beeman. I don't know. You got some pocket collapsers in there, but I think you need to get more complimentary pass rush in some form or fashion to Yanze Pierre. And right now, even with Zulu, he's still not a proven product yet, and so there's still uncertainty there. I'll be curious to see what that ends up looking like as we get closer to the season. Lisa Fitz, appreciate you being here. Positive additions at key positions so far. Thanks, Clint. Absolutely. That dude, can you see Simmons playing more of the 3 and less nose tackle? Absolutely. And I talked about that yesterday with Terrence Green addition because I think Beeman is like a 0-1 tech. And once again, always want to clarify, when I say the 3 tech, the noses are going to be playing a 3. Like they're going to be playing over the guard. And they're going to be playing over the guard a majority of their snaps most of the time. When I say 3 tech, I mean the guys who are in the 4-man fronts. They're not the 0 or 1. They're playing the 3 over the guard. And then when they go in those 30 fronts, those 3-man fronts rather than 4, they're playing like a 3-4 defensive end type. Like they need to be long. They need to be, because you're going against tackles and you're either head up a tackle, inside shoulder of the tackle, or outside shoulder of the tackle. And that's why when that dude refers to the 3, that's the difference, and that's what he's talking about. And yes, I think London Simmons being 6'3", long arms, 303 pounds, really not built like a nose, to be honest. He plays well in there. I do think you need to get him some snaps in there, and we'll see what ends up happening with that. But yes, I think the addition of Terrence Green, who is going to be a nose, 350 pounds, or excuse me, 330 pounds at 6'5", and Beeman and Isaiah Faga, due to his lack of length, but being disruptive and kind of twitchy a little bit, he's going to play the nose. And Stephen Boomois, they've got guys that can play that 0-1 tech. I've been searching for them to have more of a presence as a 3 tech. And one thing that I will say is, and this is a question that I had to ask myself, what did James Smith provide as a 3 tech that London Simmons can't? Like I'm over here saying, oh, well, they're normally a little bit more undersized. They're a little bit more twitched up. But like James Smith wasn't necessarily that. London Simmons, I think he could be a more productive version of James Smith. I don't know. So, yeah, I like that. I think they end up getting better on the interior, having a Terrence Green playing next to a London Simmons, and then having Edric Hill as a rotational player. Kedrick Beanley-Jones getting in there, Jeremiah Beeman, Isaiah Faga, and then maybe, Cam Johnson, maybe a Corey Howard. Once again, like some of the guys they might have available. Let's see. Garrett Gaskin, appreciate the $9.99 super chat. Clint, I'm getting married in March, and you best believe me, and the groomsmen will be locked in with the content that weekend. Really can't wait for the spring practice content. First of all, congratulations, brother. That is awesome. Secondly, I'm not saying remind me. You shouldn't have to remind me. I'm going to take a note, but I'm going to try to do something special for you. Don't know what it's going to be, but you're always loyal. You're always here. And so I'm going to take a note of that right now and make sure that because I'm one of those that if I don't write it down, I forget it. And I mean, no disrespect, but you're in March. I'll reach out and I'll get the details. But I got you in March. We'll have to do something. It's very cool. I appreciate you guys being locked in for sure. Tons of spring content coming. But that's awesome that you're getting married, brother. I'm so proud for you. Let's see, Jonesy. I think Simmons was forced to play nose due to the Keenan and Beeman injuries. He feels more like a 3 tech to me. I think he could play the 3. There's no doubt in my mind. But I was seeing him play that 0-1 even before Keenan got injured in fall camp, and I saw him playing it back in the spring. Once again, you see him playing tons of 3, but normally it's 2 guys playing the 3 when you do. And anytime there was a 0 or 1, like if he was out there, he was playing that position. So while I think to an extent you're correct, I also know that wasn't just through injuries, but he held up extremely well. And just the fact that you've got a guy who can play all up along your defensive front like that and play a little bit further out if you need him to, he's got the potential to be really, really impactful for Alabama. Will Terrence Green be better than James Smith? I think it's possible. I think they're different players. I think they do different things. Like one is a nose, one is a 3 tech. And James Smith was going to be a more impactful pass rusher. While it was wildly inconsistent, he was still going to be more impactful than Terrence Green. But from what they both brought, like the best of what they brought, Terrence Green, run stopping ability, James Smith was the run defense as well. I think Terrence Green can be more consistent there. You know what you're going to get from Terrence Green on a snap in, snap out basis. So yeah, I would say in some ways he could be. Also, I mean, you never know how a guy's going to transition to a different defense. Maybe it highlights his skill set. James Smith is still a former 5-star. It's kind of the equivalent of Zulu versus Keon Keeley, where when I'm looking at the 2 players right now, I say I actually think Terrence Green is, because of his consistency, he's probably better, does different things, like where he's going to line up, but he's probably a little bit better of a player than James Smith. I think Zulu is currently a little bit better of a player than Keon Keeley. But those were 2 5-star recruits who still have crazy good upside. And in a new system or just a year more development to get more, build on that consistency, I could end up looking foolish for that take come this time next year. Maybe one of those guys or maybe both of those guys are talked about as being first-round draft picks. I don't think Terrence Green's going to be a first-round pick. I don't think Des Zulu is going to be a first-round pick. I do think Zulu does have some first-round traits, but he's older. Jonesy, Clint, who is the favorite to be the play caller at inside linebacker? I don't think it's going to be Caleb Woodson. I would say Caden Jones at this point would probably be my guess. I heard he's a pretty intelligent player. Has picked up on the defense. I think he's got a little bit of versatility. QB Reese is one that I think could definitely handle it. I just worry about the size. Like I would love to see him get out there and just see him. We've seen him at times in mop-up duty coming in late and he makes plays every time he's out there. Kind of a little Sean Dion Hamilton-esque in that sense. But I do worry about the size a little bit. And I'll just have to see how he holds up as like an every down player if he gets that opportunity. But maybe him, I could see it from Luke Metz. It could be a number of different guys. But right now I would say Caden Jones, QB Reese, or Luke Metz are probably the 3 favorites in my opinion. But I could be wrong on that. That's just a pure guess. Garrett Gaskin, shout out to Jonesy. Really respect your takes, man. Ball for real, brother. He does. Yeah, and so many of you guys do. All you guys bring great conversation. But yeah, Jonesy definitely brings them, man. Every comment, I know that I click on his, we're going to get something that's going to be a great question or just great take from him. BKH, Cavante Henry, a high 4-star JUCO stud. What's up with that? I said yesterday, do not forget about old Cavante. That's a guy who, as I mentioned yesterday, I know that it was through injuries, but the fact that when LT Overton was banged up or not available, You did see a lot of Keon Keeley, but in those obvious passing situations, they turned to Cavante Henry. I think they like the upside as a pass rusher. I still think he's got to continue. He got really big, really fast. He went from being like a 220, 225 pound JUCO player to being a 265 pound, 268 pound bandit in Kane Wommack's defense in the matter of a year, pretty much. And that's a lot to adjust to, but I think he's got a little bit of upside as a pass rusher. And he was a B and C gap disruptor on the JUCO level. And what I mean by that is, between the guard and the tackle, the B gap, or the tackle and the tight end, the C gap, he was very disruptive attacking those gaps. He has some twitch and some explosiveness. And granted, him doing that at 268 pounds versus him doing that at 220 pounds, you're going to lose some of the explosiveness. I mean, it's 40 or 50 pounds light or heavier. But I think that he's one of those where I still think he's got some good explosiveness at that size. And so I wouldn't write him off. And I actually think I haven't been told by anybody, but I mean, Devin Tompkins, sure. Zulu obviously is going to be in that conversation. Maybe Caleb Smith gets involved, even though I think right now he was probably more so signed as a depth piece. They've had 2 or 3 bandits rotating. And so I wouldn't be shocked at all if Cavante Henry gets his chance. All right, guys, I think that's going to do it for this show. This has been fun. Put it in about 1 hour and 15. Been pretty steady. Comments have been great as always. It's a lot going on for Alabama. Don't think they're done by any means. Don't know that we'll continue to be seeing them stack multiple commitments every day. But I think this roster looks vastly different, but it's a promising roster. I'm excited to see how it continues to get developed. I will be curious to see what ends up happening with the coaching staff, but we're not slowing down anytime soon. We're still going to have a ton of things to talk about and look at as far as this roster. I'm going to continue to be diving into the tape of all these guys. I've watched 3, sometimes 4 games on pretty much anybody that Alabama's added, and quite a bit on guys that even they didn't end up adding. But I'm going to be diving into all of these players extensively, trying to find every snap that I possibly can, because it's now a lot more manageable. And so there's maybe some takeaways or some things that I saw in maybe the 3 or 4 games that I've watched so far, where as you get a more complete picture, you realize, oh, well, this guy's role changed a little bit. And then he started being asked to do this, and maybe he does this well. And, so there could be some, imagine me watching a bunch of early season Keon Keeley. His role evolved a little bit. It changed through necessity in a lot of ways. But I would probably have said, well, this guy doesn't need to be playing even like a 4-eye on the inside shoulder of the tackle. He's not an interior gap player whatsoever. I'd have been saying that about him. But then once that injury happened and he started playing it more, oh, well, there's been some improvement. So my point in saying that is there's still so much that we are going to come to learn about these players. And as I learn it, I'm going to share it with all of you guys. We're going to talk about it, and we're going to talk about how it impacts things. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. Thank all you guys for being here. If you haven't already, get on over to rowback.com. Use the promo code Crimson20 to get 20% off your order, and we will talk to you guys soon.